Okay. Welcome, everyone. I see participants are already joining us. Please feel free to type into the chat. We'd love to hear where you guys are joining us from. My name is Meredith Burks. I'm the Product Marketing and Customer Experience Manager for Red Leaf Press. And today I'm really excited to be joined by Julie Powers and Sheila Williams-Ridge, who are co-authors of Nature-Based Learning for Young Children. And I'm going to let them do a brief introduction of themselves. And we received quite a few questions ahead of time. So we are going to start with those. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature. You'll be able to upvote and it'll just sort of help me keep an eye on what questions we've answered. So Julie, do you want to start and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Julie Powers. I'm a professor of early childhood education at the University of Hawaii Maui College. I'm originally from Tucson, Arizona, and I started a nature-based preschool in West Paul, Minnesota called Dodge Nature Center, and that's how Sheila and I first started working together.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Sheila Williams-Ridge. I live in Roseville, Minnesota, which is right outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I'm the director of the lab school at the University of Minnesota, and we work with children 2 to 5 years old and also in teacher preparation. I'm also pretty active in the Natural Start Alliance and Minneapolis Nature Preschool and several supporting other nature-based teachers around the country as I can.
Great, wonderful. Thank you both for being here. We are going to get right to it. Like I said, we are talking about nature-based learning. And the first question we have here is, as a small preschool reopening in September, we hope to turn our great outdoor space into an outdoor classroom. We are very solid in our science and nature activities. How can we also integrate math, language arts, and art for a well-rounded day? How do I set up targeted learning centers to address areas of student learning and/or interests? And wouldn't it mean setting up and dismantling outdoor zones all of the time? Should I have a base setup and then bring in special zones for particular periods of time? And Sheila, I think you were going to start us off
Yeah,
with that one.
I'll get started. It's a long question. So good luck in opening up in September. We've all missed being with children. I'm pretty excited about the fall and I'm ready to get there. We've missed being with children. My program has actually been closed since March. So I'm super excited for you and for all of us who have missed time with kids. I would say the thing that we do and that we have done at Dodge and at lots of other places is to just do a lot of planning as a team, as a teaching team. We use webbing. I did pull up, it's just a snapshot of the picture from the book, but it shows a topic web example. And so to make sure that you are really giving children a well-rounded experience, going through something that is of interest of children and, getting back to school after being away for COVID, it might start with something like germs, or it might start with something that children in your area are experiencing around the fall. In September, leaves aren't quite changing yet, but just look around and see what's happening and what might help children transition to the space. Or it could be something like home, and you can go through, animal homes, insect homes, lots of different things. But I think starting with a few topics, I would do this for several. That way you're ready for whoever walks in your door, and then making sure to be really broad with the area. So we have blocks in construction and math and music and cooking and food and technology. And then I would take this and I would think about what are those things that you need to do. So if you're going to be outside, I really like using a wagon that has different waterproof bins of what we need for that day. So I would take several of these books from the literacy list and put them in a bin. And then I would have a blanket. If you want to set up the outdoors, kind of like you set up an indoor classroom, think about a blanket as a center. And so we put the blanket down and then we put some literacy or some math manipulatives or, something for fine motor. We had a nature bingo game that we got from Acorn Naturalist that was pretty popular. And so that lived in a bin and we put that on a blanket. So I would say, think about that. That way, at the end of the day, cleaning is something that's pretty simple. It just goes back into the bin and you fold up the blankets and put it back. But I think because you don't want to have to spend a lot of time setting up and cleaning up every single day. And I think, you know, the best thing is just to take advantage of the natural materials from where you are. So if you have sticks or rocks or sand or shells, I'm trying to incorporate those things as much as possible and thinking about how you can use those in your curriculum. So did I answer all the parts of that question?
Great, I think you did, yeah. And we are going to be sharing these slides with people after today's session, and we are recording. I didn't mention that in the beginning. So I think this is a really nice topic sample, and I like the idea of using blankets. So like you said, you're not reconstructing every
I think
single day.
And I think that will also help with COVID because if you're thinking about that you are going to be outside and you want to social distance a little bit, having a blanket that is a size big enough for maybe 2 children or 1 child to be on, and depending on how your program is going to go about social distancing, that can really help you limit kind of contact between children or groups of children. Julie, was there anything you wanted to add?
There are 2 things. One is I tell my students there is just about nothing that you can't do better outdoors than you can do indoors. So you have to get out of that mindset of this is something that's an indoor experience and this is something that's an outdoor experience. And the second is make sure that what you're offering makes sense for the ecosystem you're in. Having started my teaching career in Tucson, I had to make sure I wasn't following what would be more natural in the Midwest or the East.
Great. Okay, we also have a question here. How do I keep children safe and engaged in less than ideal weather in an outdoor classroom? For example, rain, high winds, extreme hot or cold, or high UV index weather. And I think, Julie, you were going to start with that.
Yeah, I'm going to start talking about the hot and wet. But the first thing I want to say is a really important thing to not do is use yourself or the adults as a barometer for whether it's too cold or too hot or too wet or too windy. In cold weather, we tend to get cold faster than the children because we are not running around. We often don't have as good gear on. And the opposite is true in hot weather. We are more likely to stay in the shade and not move around as much and listen to when we need hydration. So in relation to hot weather, the 2 most important things in my mind is hydration and UV protection. Children are not going to stop and get a drink of water as often as they are starting to get dehydrated. Just like you know, children aren't going to stop playing to go to the bathroom often. They're even less motivated to stop to get a drink of water. And how you build in water breaks is important, and how you make water available. The traditional drinking fountain is the worst. Especially in COVID-19, you're going to spread germs, and it's really hard to get very much water in your mouth. So in my mind, personal water bottles that are cleaned every day is the best way, and really modeling. And then to protect for UV protection, make sure that there is shade beyond just trees. I don't know any place that has enough trees to really provide enough shade in hot weather. So being able to construct other kinds of shade, being able to move it during the year as the sun position changes, and putting really high interest activities under that shade. And having a hat with a brim is really important, not just for protecting skin, but also eyes. The lighter colored eyes people have, the more likely they are to grow, what's the word I'm trying to come up with, Sheila?
I don't know.
On your eyes, you get
like a cataract or?
Cataract, thank you. Cataract later in life. Sheila, why don't you talk and wet weather, rain gear is the most important piece, and making sure children have dry clothing to change into. Sheila, why don't you talk about cold and high winds and stuff.
Yeah, I pulled up a chart that I use. There are lots of charts that different programs use around the country. This is one from the National Weather Service. I like to go with the experts when I can. So this is about when you would get frostbite on exposed skin, and this is about how long it takes. So I think knowing information about, okay, how long is it safe for children to be outside, and then what do children need? So this is available on the NOAA website. They have one for cold and they have one for heat. So I think that that's pretty important and helpful. And this is on the weather.gov website, and it's a nice graphic that shows about how to dress for weather. And you can see in places where there's extreme cold, like Minnesota or Canada, there are days where children need to come with 2+ layers of pants, or 3 or more layers of upper, a warm hat, a face mask, those types of things. So I grabbed the gear list that we have listed. It's in the book, but there are lots of gear lists out there. One of the most important things is waterproof mittens, kind of like Julie talked about with wet weather, making sure that the children are dry. And I think one of those really important things is to talk with children when they do say they're cold, to not just decide that we're all going inside, or to say you'll be fine, even if you think they'll be fine, but to ask them questions like, what's feeling cold? Really listening to children, I think, is important, especially when you're talking about severe weather. What are the things that scare them? How is their body feeling? I think getting in touch with those things is important for us as adults, and to teach the children. So having supplies is also really important. So extra neck warmers, extra wool socks. Lots of teachers in Minnesota that teach during the winter carry extra wool socks in their pockets, because we know, like, if someone's toes get cold and you're out, you're a little bit further from the building, it can make it for a much more productive experience outdoors. And what we want is for them to always be safe and comfortable while they're out there. So those are kind of the basics for cold weather. You can always ask me more questions. This is talking about getting children out in cold weather. I think that could take up our entire time, but I also like to talk about severe weather. So I use different apps on my phone, and I turn on notifications on days where I'm not sure, like where the weather is going to go. So if there's dangerous, pollutants in the air or asthma, you can get an app. I would suggest looking at the ones that are the most popular in your area, because they're going to be different for us across the country. I use my radar or just the weather app from Apple on my phone, and they seem to be pretty good. But other people have different recommendations, and I think it is all about like how fast weather changes where you are and what you need to watch out for.
Great. I do want to, go ahead, Julie.
It's important to teach children to get themselves dressed. It takes a lot of time, but if you let children stay inside while they're waiting to get everybody dressed, it's easy to get overheated, start sweating, and then you're already wet before you get out there. And being sensitive to children who have sensory defensiveness, some children, if their sock is just a little off, have a really hard time with that. So being sensitive to those things.
Yeah, I also want to mention, I've been kind of following the chat here as well, and there's some conversations going on. This is from Crystal. She says, here in Alberta, we've been told not to use natural materials such as sticks, pine cones, etc., because these items aren't sanitized. And then other people are asking, who told you not to use natural materials? So have you guys heard anything about those? I mean, I know every state, every territory, every business is probably different, but I just wanted to know if you guys had any thoughts by hearing that.
Yeah. Sheila, you want to start with that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start. So far, I mean, we don't know everything that there is to know about COVID-19. I think it's going to be a long time until we have all of the facts. But we do know that it can last for a little while on surfaces, but we know that most modes of transmission, or most of the transmission, is done from breathing the same air as other people. So one of the things I would suggest about the benefits of using natural materials is that there are usually lots of them. So children aren't, it's not like a set of blocks in a classroom where you have to like get in there and sanitize the blocks between uses, because there are so many sticks or so many rocks. And so the chances that children are touching the same ones, I think, are more limited. And then the things that they're finding, and right, like I said, the findings will continue to change, but that UV and humidity, those things seem to impact COVID and make it so that it doesn't last as long on surfaces. So I think as we learn more, I'm hoping by fall we'll know more about that, but that using natural materials will be safer than using like a plastic climbing equipment or a metal slide or something that is a person-built material outdoors.
Okay. So I want to make sure that we address that. That was quite a bit going on in the chat about that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any other final questions about ideal weather before we move on to the next question that was submitted? Okay. This is about family engagement. How should or can we involve families in nature learning experiences?
Okay, I'm going to start with that. First thing I suggest is that you get buy-in from your families. For a lot of families, when they think of time outdoors, they think of recess because that's their frame of reference from their own education. And just as we are helping parents understand the importance of what early literacy looks like versus learning to read and write later grades, we can provide a lot of information for them to help them understand why we are spending a lot of time with nature and outdoors. Another consideration is not making families' jobs harder. Sometimes we get resistance to having children outdoors or spending time in nature, and what families may say is, I think it's a waste of time, but what they're really saying is, when you do this, then after working, cooking, blah, 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 now I have to do laundry more often. Now I have to bathe children more often. I'm having to do their hair more often. So there are steps you can take to really reduce the impact on families. One of the things we did at Dodge was get a washer and dryer. And so if children had been really muddy, we could wash their clothes during nap time. Another thing is making sure that they have a good fitting change of clothes, and you can then wash those at another time if that makes families' time easier. And the last is to help families find ways that they can enjoy being outdoors. They aren't going to necessarily, if they're people who do that a lot, have ideas for how to do that, how to engage their children, how far might be too far for their little ones to walk. So finding opportunities to share ideas with families can make a big difference. Sheila, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add, a lot of families have things that they do outside together as a family, and it might look different, you know, depending on their background and the place that you're from and their culture. And so I think incorporating some of those things outside. So we did a celebration where for weeks we emptied out eggs and we filled them with confetti and we painted them on the outside. And then we had this fun day of like breaking eggs or cascarones over each other's heads and celebrating. And that was a thing that that came from our families. And I think it doesn't always have to look like a hike in the woods or a bonfire, which I love both of those things, but it can look a lot of different ways. It can be a picnic outside. It can be having a small, you know, gathering. I think making sure to have times where families can find joy together. So even if it's going pretend fishing with fishing poles that the children made in class, where there's no chance of them actually catching anything in, you know, in the pond that's very, very small. But it can be full of joy. And I think prioritizing those things, that's what we want, is for families and children to find joy there together. And then I also think being really sensitive to families who don't want children to be like brought home muddy or sent home with this thing. I think that it can be a very important thing for a lot of families that their child can do things after school. So we had some families early on, and they're like, how am I supposed to like get my child in the car when they're, you know, when they're very muddy, or we have places to go. Like, this is not the only thing that we do in our day. Now we have to go, and I have to take them to this place, and, you know, or we have to go grocery shopping, and, you know, and they're so muddy. And so I think having materials and being very respectful is really important. So, you know, like Julie said, having a washer and dryer, but also, you know, having options for family of children having like school clothes. So when they get to school, they can change into something that they can be more muddy in. And then before they leave, they change back into clothes that they can travel in. And I think it also shows a lot of respect for not just the family, but also for the materials, like their clothes and what they need. And then you can either wash those at school, or they can take them home to be ready for the next day.
Oh, I want to add one more thing that Sheila made me think of, and that is there's a lot of cultural issues with how children come to school, and getting wound up in at school children need to come ready to be dirty, blah, 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 can give a message to families that your cultural beliefs are wrong and ours are right. For some cultures, sending children to school dressed like they're going to Sunday school is a way of showing respect. And so rather than criticize and tell families they're doing it wrong, find a way to make it work.
Great. And I think you guys also had a slide with an example of letter to parents.
Oh, yes, we did.
So again, these slides are all going to be shared after the session as well. So you don't need to write furiously. I know that we did not send these out ahead of time, but they will be coming after the fact, so you can reference them.
And
later.
they're all in the book.
And they are all in the book. Thank you. Yes. So this whole thing is based on nature-based learning for young children, which is a book that Julie Powers and Sheila Williams-Ridge co-authored that is available from Red Leaf Press. And we're going to talk even more about that at the end. But right now we kind of want to power through a few more questions here before the end of our time. Go ahead, Sheila.
And I just wanted to tell everyone about the parent letters. So most of them are adapted from letters that we actually wrote to parents about different things. So this is an example of, you know, of why are we taking children outside in the rain? It's a good question. I mean, what are children actually going to learn? How is this going to benefit them? So I just included the first 4. I think we have about 7 different things. And then throughout the book, there are different letters to families about like thanking them for sending their child to a place where we are going to get messy, and they are going to have these hands-on experiences, and kind of what that's about. And then there are some about, you know, playing with reptiles, and why does your child want to take rocks home? And what about if you want to choose a pet for your home or your classroom? What are ways to engage with your children about that? So so there are more letters to families, and they're just in a format that you can just take a copy. You can just copy it right out of the book. Yeah. Or you can alter the language if you'd like.
Okay. I have another question here. Can mini outdoor field trips be set up in the community for nature learning in light of COVID-19, such as bike path walk, field trips, conservation area and garden, and visiting farms, etc.?
I'm going to take that and just say every municipality has different rules. Every state has different rules. So there's not a blanket thing that Sheila and I can say. In the absence of other guidance, we always say go to the CDC, and NAEYC also has a lot of information about what is appropriate and not appropriate in COVID-19 era.
Yeah, and I think that those things are going to change between, I mean, I think it's something that as professionals, we have to keep up to date with. It's kind of like thinking about what does the newest research in the field say about like how is best to teach, you know, math or different things. We're going to have to keep up with COVID-19 even faster, and what do they know, and how will this influence our practice? So I think, like Julie said, paying attention to, we get alerts from our local Minnesota Department of Health they also have forums each week. So I would look for that locally to see if there are places that they tell you kind of what your limitations are. For a little while in Minnesota, they had a rule that both family and center-based childcare could not take children to public parks. And we were not happy about that, but they did amend it pretty quickly afterwards to say playgrounds. So they didn't want children playing on playgrounds because of some of the reasons that we talked about earlier with the transmission of viruses and other germs. But now children can use playgrounds, but they want teachers to do things like wash hands directly after and do different things. So I would say look at where you are and what those guidelines are, and try and sign up for an alert so that you know when those are changing and what the best practices are. But as soon as you can, I think getting out and taking walks when it's safe in your place. COVID numbers are all over the place around the country. Some states are going down, some states are going up at a pretty rapid rate. So I think being very mindful of those things so that we can all do our best to keep children safe.
Yeah, here in Hawaii, every park and beach was closed until recently. So just because you've heard something, oh, we're not allowed to do this, staying current will help you know what's changing.
This next question here, I think, is a very practical one, which I appreciated. How do you handle toileting and hand washing?
Yeah, so I'll take this one. I have done some camps where we're outside for the entire time. The easiest thing is to locate your school or your program close to a space where you can go inside and wash hands and use toilets. But if you are a little bit further out, and I think even for just the COVID-19, we're going to want more hand washing stations. So I did I pulled a couple of photos of different portable hand washing. So we're going to probably add a couple of these to our outside spaces just to make sure that children are washing their hands a little bit more often. We're probably going to spend more of our day outside. And so we want to make sure that children have access to that. In the past, we've done something kind of like that picture on the bottom where you just have, a clean bucket of water that runs over and then it goes into a dirty bucket. Children do not ever dip their hands into anything. It is all flowing, clean water. And so you'll want to find a system that works. But the big one here on the left is available for about $100. It has a clean tank and then there is a tank for dirty water. And it's operated by a foot pump. So all of these are foot pump operated. I think that's very important to make sure that you have a way that children can wash their hands without having to touch any surfaces. So those are some things that I would suggest if you have a little, bit of money, especially if you were able to get some of the kind of COVID grants or things that are helped your program over the summer to invest in something that will allow for some more hand washing to occur, I think is a great thing. And so you can just put this anywhere on your playground, fill it up in the morning, empty it, in the afternoon. You may have to, if you have children there all day, you may have to fill it once more during the day. So with toileting, the easiest thing is just to pee in the woods. But if you're in like a smaller public space, I would say going inside is going to be the best thing that you can do. If you are going to be further away from a building, having a space that is, so these are some examples that you can use. And so they have a lot of these are things that you would take camping. So there's one that has a little tent and children can have a little bit of privacy, even though an adult can always supervise them. You clean up the bottom. You can change it as often as your program deems necessary. But these are also very portable. So you can take it to a place where you need it. The one on the top even has like a little carrying handle. But when it folds out, it looks the same as the one on the upper right. And so you can see that they're very portable. They're pretty easy to use. Again, you would do all of the best, your best practices. So you would wear gloves, you would have children wash their hands after you tied up the bag. You would also, dispose of that and wash your hands after. So all of the same things would happen. It just would occur in the space that you are, and you do have to carry it a little bit of a ways with you. And then I would say making sure that you have whatever disinfectant spray your program uses to disinfect any of the surfaces that the children sit on or are in contact with, and then allowing time for that to dry between children using it.
Great. And I think in our follow-up email, Sheila, I may ask for some links if you have the actual names of these products. I've seen a couple of questions,
Sure.
especially for the hand washing
Yeah.
sinks. So we'll include all of that in our follow-up
Okay.
as well. Great. Next question here. What resources would you recommend to us that we can use for creating some ready-to-go lesson plans for our 13 pre-K and K teachers? This person they're just dipping their toes. They are in the dipping our toes stage, so it would likely need to be a resource that covers the basics.
Yeah. So I'll start this one. I would say starting with something like team building, as doing the webs that we mentioned at the beginning, talking through your curriculum, what is in your space, and then looking for resources I think that are close to where you are. So here, the school that both Julie and I worked at, Dodge Nature Preschool, the staff over many years worked together to produce a document that's called 4 Seasons at a Nature-Based Preschool. And it was really the product of different teachers trying things and webbing and putting together a resource that really was a roadmap for them. And every teacher can choose from whatever materials or whichever sections they want to use, but I thought it was a really helpful manual. I still have mine in a 3-ring binder because I use pieces of it and I tab things, and there are things that come up and I'm like, oh yes, you never want to forget about deep fried dandelions or some of those other special treats. And so some of those things are in that book. But I would say different places have different needs around curriculum. So webbing, and perhaps some even like larger community webbing. So not just your program, but maybe other programs around you. Like, how can we support children through this that's happening in our local area? I think about some of the things that are happening in Minneapolis right now, and how we as a community really need to think about how are we going to support children transitioning back to school after so much unrest in several different ways. So I think that's where I would start, is looking for resources, but also using your professionals that you have on staff as a resource, because there's not just like one thing that's going to be everything that you need. But I think for places around Minnesota, the Dodge manual is a pretty helpful one.
Okay, great. And I see we are at our time. We have not gotten to all of the questions that were submitted, so I do apologize for that, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. Julie and Sheila, thank you so much. Do you guys have any final comments before I kind of wrap it up for people?
I would just say, using the language the last question used, it dipping your toes, give it a try and don't feel like you have to be in an all or nothing situation. Give yourself and other people you work with permission to try things that don't work, and be open with the children about it.
Yeah, and I think that's so true about all of this. I think finding places that you can share ideas that you have and listen to other professionals that have tried other things, right? We can learn from each other. So Natural Start Alliance has different, there's one large group that you can join at that website, but you can also find local regional groups that might be a little bit more specific to your area. In Minnesota, we have MINECO, the Minnesota Early Childhood Outdoors, and that's a group where you get together and can do professional development around this topic too. So I would say look for some of those organizations that can support you and that you can add your expertise to as well.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Sheila, do you want to switch the slide? And I just wanted to mention again, Julie and Sheila's amazing book, Nature-Based Learning for Young Children. The subtitle says a lot. It's anytime, anywhere, on any budget. We are going to offer 25% off using the code NATURE20 on the Red Leaf Press website, or when you talk to customer service. Again, we're going to be sending up a follow-up email with a recording, the PowerPoint slides, some links, and names of the products that we talked about today, and that will be included in that next one as well. And then I think one more. Oop, if you want to go back. I just wanted to really briefly mention we have another webinar about creating diversity-rich environments on Friday with Angel Sancho Passy, and that is going to be an hour long, so we're going to do a little bit more time. Angel is doing a bit more of a formal presentation, and then we're going to get into the Q&A, so feel free to register for that. That is coming up Friday. And then we are also have our texting program, Early Childhood Activities from Red Leaf Press. You can sign up. It's free to register and get activities sent straight to your phone. We have used a couple of activities from Nature-Based Learning, so you might see that come in some week as well. So thank you everyone who joined. Again, I do apologize we didn't get to all the questions. There were a lot of really good ones. I'm also going to be saving the chat so people can see that. There's a lot of great resources going in that section as well. So Julie, Sheila, thank you again so much for taking the time to be with
And
us
thanks
today.
for arranging this. We really enjoyed it.
Great.
Thank you. This was fun. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.